Well, folks, thanks for being here. Welcome back to the lounge here at Burton Avenue United Church. I'm here, Bob Clay, with Al McGee, and we're here for the last of 4 Advent sessions where we're looking at why the early Christians may have seen Jesus as the long-awaited Messiah. The series is inspired by a book that was written by Tom Wright called Simply Christian, and in that book he talks about the Messiah that was being expected as having links to the temple, to the king, to Torah, and would bring a new creation. So we've looked at the temple and the king and the Torah connections, and today we're going to look at the new creation that was expected. Now, one response of the post-exilic Jewish writers under the domination of first the Babylonians and then the Greeks and then the Romans was to develop this sense that God was finally going to put things to right, that finally evil would be defeated and the world would be a happier place to be, more even, more equal. And those writings talk about how God would create a new world, one like the world that was imagined in the Torah, as we talked about last week. Well, Daniel is one of the best known of those writings in the Old Testament, but there are others too. There's in the prophets Isaiah and Jeremiah and Ezekiel all have this same kind of sense that God's finally going to put things to right. Here in Isaiah, we see that God has promised that he's about a new project, create a new heavens and a new earth. And Jeremiah, too, talks about this new covenant between God and Israel, where God would be the God of the people and God would put the law, the Torah, in their hearts. So they hoped that God was going to create this new world where things were going to be put to right. There's a whole new world coming, folks. It was believed by many at the time, and probably still today, that God acted directly on God's own behalf, and also that God acted through human and transcendent agents like angels. One of those transcendent agents was referred to in the book of Daniel as the Son of Man, and that caught the eye of the early Christians. Here in the citation from Daniel's book, we see that Daniel's talking about one coming who's like the Son of Man, coming on the clouds, and who would be given dominion and everlasting control, and whose kingship would never be ended or destroyed. So this caught the eye of the early Christian church. The notions of righting evil at the end of time and institution of this new regime under God is also present in the New Testament and the writings in that. Specifically, it's most strong in the book of Revelation, but it also appears in the Gospels and Paul's letters. So the early Christians were translating that prophecy from the Old Testament into their thinking in the New Testament. The Gospels all refer to Jesus as the Son of Man, and in fact, Jesus himself referred to himself as that in several passages, and here you can see one from each of the Gospels, where Jesus is claiming to be that Son of Man that was talked about in Daniel's prophecy. So the conclusions that we have for this week is that it's likely true that the early Christians were seeing Jesus as bringing about this new creation, this new covenant, this new world that was talked about in many of the prophets. And overall, it's likely, from what we've seen over the past few weeks, that the first Christians who were steeped in this end-of-time hope this hope for a new revival of Israel, this new world, as Tom Wright suggests, it's likely that they were seeing Jesus as the Messiah, who was going to be God's agent, bringing about this new world order based on God and God's principles. That there would be a creation of this new kingdom based on the Torah teachings, and that Jesus was in fact the King Messiah who would lead the people into that new kingdom, and they expected that to happen fairly quickly. And that Jesus was the Messiah who was the place where people could go to be in touch with God, the place where God touched people directly rather than the temple of old. So folks, I hope you've enjoyed these last couple of weeks. Thanks for being with us, and we hope you all have a very blessed Christmas. Thanks for being here.